My name is Victor Fuhrman. Some call me the Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. Alchemy is an ancient philosophy that focused on the purification and transformation of materials. The highest pursuit of the alchemist, known as the Magnum Opus, or Great Work, was the creation of the Philosopher's Stone, purported to transmute lead into gold. Is there a form of alchemy today? If so, may it be used for personal transformation, to transmute illness, suffering, and disease, the lead of our lives, into the gold of our authentic selves and the key to good health and well-being. My guests this week on Destination Unlimited, Lorie Dechar and Benjamin Fox, say that we can do this by bringing the soul of medicine back into our lives. Lorie Dechar holds a master's degree in acupuncture from the Traditional Acupuncture Institute and training in archetypal psychology, Gestalt, and focus-oriented psychotherapy. She was a member of the faculty of the Tri-State College of Acupuncture in New York City and leads workshops and trainings nationwide. With her husband, Benjamin Fox, she co-founded A New Possibility, a global healing and learning community. Benjamin Fox is a professional counseling astrologer and a licensed massage therapist with 20 years of integrative bodywork and healing experience. Their website is anewpossibility.com, and they join us this week to share their paths and book, The Alchemy of Inner Work, a guide for turning illness and suffering into true health and well-being. Please welcome the Destination Unlimited, Lorie Dechar and Benjamin Fox. Welcome.
Thank you, Victor.
Thanks so much for having us, Victor. It's already fun to be here together.
And thank you so much for joining me and sharing your message with our listeners. So let's first share your respective paths and personal discoveries along the way. Lorie, please start.
So when people ask me that, I look back and I say, when did I start this? And often I'll come to, I started in utero. I feel I was born to do this work. But the real turning point for me was when my father got sick when I was 10. He had a brain tumor, and my sort of idyllic childhood came to an end, and I started to become very engaged with the nature of the healing process. For me, that led to a question of how can we actually live through something that feels devastating and transform it into a growing, growthful experience. So when I discovered alchemy, I kind of knew that was my path. Formally, I would say I started studying alchemy probably about 20 years ago, but I would add that was around the same time I met Benjamin, and I think together we have been living alchemy through our work and our lives together. Benjamin, what would you say?
I would say probably the real starting point for me occurred when I was in college. I had a number of sort of personal illnesses, and a friend of mine turned me on to the owner of a health food store, actually, in my hometown. And through that relationship, I radically changed the way I was eating. I started eating a whole foods diet, and I had grown up on just a kind of typical American diet of a lot of processed foods and such, and a lot of sugar. And when I changed my diet, everything kind of turned around for me. And my world opened up in ways that I never really imagined were possible. And that set me on a path of wanting to understand myself, the impact of our food choices on our life, and ultimately led me into alternative healing and made lots of connections to people who helped me along my path. So
Now, here is the big story. We could actually do the entire interview on this, but I'll just ask you the abbreviated version. How did the two of you meet?
Yeah, that's a big story.
I'll let you.
I'll start. You finish or you continue. We met at a workshop, and we met. What was it, Benjamin? 22 years ago now.
Mm-hmm. It was in '96, so it was longer than that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
nearly 25 years, going on 25 years. Yeah.
Whoa. Well, you're better at me at keeping track of dates, but we always laugh about this because we met at a workshop and we've kind of been ever since creating opportunities for people to heal and explore and discover more about themselves. The workshop was called The Body Sacred, and it was focused on the intersection of sexuality and spirituality. And I think we came to it in synchronous ways. A friend of mine looked at me one day and said, "There's this workshop on sex and spirit, and you've got to be there." And I think Benjamin, also our friend Rudy Ballantyne, told you had to be there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, in fact, I was working for Dr. Rudolph Ballantyne at the time, and he was attending and encouraged me to join the workshop as well. Mm-hmm.
And I was coming out of a marriage, a fairly conventional marriage of 10 years, and felt that I wanted to explore new possibilities, new ways of relating, new identity in terms of gender, in terms of how spirituality and the body could come together, rather than being sort of separate domains. And so it was a wonderful workshop, but of course the best part of it was that Benjamin and I met there, and I think the second night we lay down on the floor and started talking about our astrology charts.
Yeah.
And then it went on from there.
Yeah, I was delighted I was already, I wasn't a practicing astrologer at the time, but I had an interest in astrology for many years. And so I was pretty delighted to discover that Lorie spoke the language as well and was able to sort of get to know each other through sharing the particulars of our charts, our sun, our moon, our rising signs, and so forth. And so that was the beginning of
the alchemy.
The alchemy.
Absolutely. Carl Jung said, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. How did your meeting transform the both of you?
Lorie, I could start with that one.
Great.
Yeah. Well, to be completely sort of transparent and honest, up until the time when I met Lorie in '96, I had always, I guess since college, been very much in question about my own personal sexuality. At different times, I had identified as a homosexual man and other times as bisexual. And when I met Lorie, it everything got kind of turned on its head. I mean, truly, I was invited into a relationship that allowed me to deeply, deeply explore who I am. And that hasn't stopped. My connection to Lorie keeps inviting me into that exploration. So it was life-changing for me in that way. Lorie, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that for me, I certainly didn't expect when I met Benjamin. I was totally intrigued. It was delightful. There were sparks, and there was all this kind of newness to it, especially coming out of a very conventional marriage where I was married to a doctor who was much more in charge of our lives. I think there was a sense of equality, and there was a sense that we were exploring together, but I didn't expect honestly, I never expected that we would end up spending the rest of our lives together. But we had this wonderful connection. And then actually we separated for a while, and that separation was painful for me in surprising ways, but I think it also catapulted me into writing my first book, Five Spirits, which is looking at the Chinese version of the energy body or chakra system. If anyone's interested in that, Five Spirits has been out now for 16 years. But I think more than anything else, Benjamin, our relationship has called me in different ways to my true nature, especially as you've always supported me in being what I truly am in astrology speak of quadruple Aries, which means a fiery, very inspired and ambitious in certain ways, committed pioneer, which I don't think anyone until you had really made space for. And that has continued even to this week, where you've kind of called me back to that mission.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. You know, it's interesting because your meeting, your relationship was alchemical for sure, because you both were transformed by it, and synchronistic. And that's something that seems to come to play, especially people on spiritual paths. There's a synchronicity. Jung called synchronicity the meaningful coincidences. And I've come to know that there are no coincidences, that everything happens for a reason.
That is for sure. Neither of us could have ever, and we laugh about this, we could never have planned this. Neither of us individually. And it really does. And we even tried to split up numerous times, as you could imagine. We're like, what are we doing together? And then boom, we find ourselves back together on the West Coast, the East Coast, New Mexico. And that spark or that fire just never went away. And then finally, well, what is it now, Benjamin? The numbers. When did we finally get married in the field in front of our house?
Well, we finally decided to live together in the same home and same state. Finally, in 2005, it was. So it was like 9 years after we had first met, and then we married each other in the field in 2012.
Wonderful.
And it just keeps getting better, really.
Wonderful. That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Lorie, you touched upon this briefly, your first book, Five Spirits. Tell us a little bit about that book.
Well, Five Spirits really was a kind of induction book. Again, as I said, we separated for a while. I had a 8-year-old daughter. I was kind of suddenly on my own as a single mother. And it was a pretty rough time for me, but I was already an acupuncturist and I was practicing, but I felt like I was practicing kind of on the edge of something. I knew with needles that I was touching something really magical and amazing in my patients, but I didn't have words for it. Of course, there's chi, life force, but I felt like it was much more of a spiritual, soulful kind of touching that I wanted to be able to speak about. And that was when I started studying Western psychology, but I didn't want to give up Chinese medicine, so I went back in and I studied classical texts. I hunted around. I actually, Carl Jung's writing on an alchemical text, The Secret of the Golden Flower, was key for me. And what I came to understand is that at the heart of Chinese medicine and Taoism is a spiritual psychology. Mm-hmm. And it's oriented around these five spirits, these five aspects of our spiritual psychology. And that the book really came to me as a kind of download that way. I felt I was being guided to it. And it's been perking along for a long time. It's still kind of a classic in the field of Chinese medicine.
I find that writing, I do a little writing myself, no major books yet, but I do a little writing. I find that writing is inspirational, that it truly does come through us, that we channel them.
I don't know about every book, Victor, but I suspect that that is true for you just as we're getting to know you a little bit. And certainly for me, writing is that. It's a transmission.
Absolutely.
It's also really hard work, and it can be grueling work. I think Benjamin and I really experienced that together with the alchemy of inner work. But it's also, it is truly potentially a spiritually transforming process.
Absolutely. I briefly touched on medieval alchemy in our introduction. What may we learn from the ancient chemists and philosophers?
So, Benjamin, you want me to take that one to start, and then maybe you can add in the astrological piece?
Sure.
So when people say, what is alchemy, the easy answer is it's the art and science of transformation. But what does that mean? What we're looking at with alchemy is a system of knowledge that actually extended from about 300 BCE right up till 1700s. Isaac Newton was actually also an alchemist. I often say it spans the time between shamanism and indigenous medicine and knowledge and modern science. What alchemists were looking for, what they were seeking, was a way to reconnect with the divine and the sacred in embodied life, in matter, so that the above, the spiritual domain, and the what we sometimes refer to as the below, this world of embodiment, are not separate. And the big, real difference between alchemy and modern science is that the alchemists included the soul and the spirit in their studies of the natural world. They didn't separate them. And I'll just say one more thing before tossing this back to you, Benjamin, that when we're talking about this idea of lead to gold, which, in our high school chemistry classes we were taught was a kind of foolish notion. In alchemy, this lead transmutation to gold is symbolic of an inner transformational process that we as humans can choose to engage in, which is the process of actually moving from being a kind of ordinary life where we're just working and doing the doing without consciousness into a life that is infused with meaning and purpose. And that takes a certain kind of choice or intentionality or a setting of the will to live our lives from a place of inner seeking. So I would say that is core. The other piece, of course, is that alchemy wasn't just European. Around the same time and even earlier, we find alchemy beginning in Egypt, in the embalming processes, in their astrology, in China, in India with Vedic medicines and yoga, and of course in the Kabbalah. So it was worldwide, wherever people were beginning to settle down and explore the cycles of the world around them. Benjamin, would you just maybe bring in the astrological piece of this?
Sure. Yeah. I think from the astrological perspective, astrology, of course, being an alchemical practice, the fundamental premise of that is that we are part of a larger cosmos, and that we are connected to the planet and the planets of our cosmos, that they express through each of us, and that each of us has a particular destiny, you could say, that is described through the birth chart, through the symbols of the birth chart. And of course, when I work with people, that's what I'm doing, is looking at those symbols and attempting to support a person in aligning their life, their choices, their decisions, their actions with we like to use the word, the entelechy of the chart, the destiny that is described by the chart for that person's life. And I think, when we talk about alchemical systems, there was always a kind of, when you talk about alchemy in relationship to the church, there was it was heretical in that it empowered the individual, in a sense, to know himself, to know herself from within, as opposed to simply accepting dogma from the outside, from the established authority. And I think in our work, we're very, very much in support of people seeking that knowledge within, knowing themselves from within. So that has been a big teaching of alchemical systems for me, and certainly a big teaching of astrology.
My guests are Lorie Dechar and Benjamin Fox. Their book is called The Alchemy of Inner Work. Please tell our listeners where they can get your books and find out more about you and this wonderful work.
Well, the book is it's for sale wherever books are sold. We love for people to support independent bookstores, but of course you can, or your local bookstore, but of course you can get the book at Amazon as well, at bookshop.org, wherever books are sold.
And they can also just come to our website, anewpossibility.com, and there's a little button that says Our Books, and that will take them to all those sites as well.
Yeah. And what type of programs do you offer at anewpossibility.com?
At A New Possibility, we have an online community network. It's a member network that you can become a part of our community. And we offer ongoing workshops, and there are also courses at the site, courses for individuals and courses for practitioners. If you're an acupuncturist, we have courses that offer CEU credits for acupuncture as well. There's a whole array of courses from Qigong to Chinese medicine. I'm working now on a beginning astrology course that will launch this year for people who want to learn how to use their chart to support their own healing. But there's also a very lively community engagement amongst the people in our network as well. Lorie, anything else you want to say?
Well, I would just add that we hold monthly gatherings, Zoom gatherings, where the community comes together and we look at questions like hope in challenging times, or what is the meaning of true health, so people can join in and actually engage live Zoom and meet other members. We have a list of practitioners who work in this way, and it's a constantly very, as Benjamin said, vibrant, lively community. We'd love to have people join if they're interested. anewpossibility.com.
And we'll be back with more of Lorie and Benjamin after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Free your mind with OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hi, this is Bill Maher. I can find humor in almost anything, but one thing I never laugh about is cruelty to animals. If you don't get the joke either, write People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, 501 Front Street, Norfolk, Virginia, 23510.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guests this week, Lorie Dechar and Benjamin Fox, were talking about their book, The Alchemy of Inner Work. So what was the genesis of alchemical healing?
Should I begin, Benjamin?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'll fill in anything that I have something very particular in mind that I want.
Oh, good. All right. Well, for me, the genesis really was that difficult time after my marriage came apart, and I was sort of thrust out on my own. Before that, I had been I was always an environmental activist and engaged in the world. I was, of course, already an acupuncturist, but I really viewed myself as a kind of poet and reclusive, more introverted person. When I was going through this really difficult time and kind of came to the core of myself, I discovered, I would say, a kind of inner fire that was determined not only to get through this tough time, but also to really support other people. And I started developing my work, I started teaching, and it was very exciting. And I would say it was my students and their questions and their hunger that really brought me to knowing that I needed to develop a system. It wasn't enough to be just doing the magic behind a closed door in my treatment room or in my own inner work, that I needed to find language. So I started teaching just a few students who wanted to know more about alchemy and Chinese medicine. We look at the 5-element wheel, we look at these spiritual processes, and the work began that way. It wasn't until Benjamin kind of came to me and said, you're doing this teaching for 5-6 people. If we work together, and Benjamin's a really fine community organizer, we can start to bring it out to more people. And given the times that we're living in, the nature of the chaos that's part of transformation, we both felt like offering a way to look at transformation within the healing process and support practitioners in supporting their patients in moving through transformation would be meaningful work. So we started working together. Again, that was about 14 years ago. Benjamin,
that was right.
Where would you go with that?
That was right at the time that I moved up to Maine to be with you, Lorie. And of course, that was right when Five Spirits was published. Yeah, and Lorie was offering a small mentorship program to students, graduates, primarily of Tri-State College of Acupuncture, where she was on the faculty. And I had a lot of experience with organization, conference management, and so creating order comes rather naturally to me, and community building is something I have a great passion for. So I suggested that we join forces and offer the mentorship together, and we called it the Alchemical Healing Mentorship at that time. And I remember that Lorie and I went through quite a process of deciding whether we were going to keep the term alchemy and alchemical as part of the work at that time. And Lorie really made a strong stand for keeping it. So,
yeah, because I feel that it's been a term, alchemy, that has in a lot of ways been denigrated by modern culture. People think of alchemy as maybe a kind of a beer or a shampoo, and it's really, for me, on a deep soul level, I felt a need to really stand for what this kind of philosophy, this way of living, really means for the soul. This is an age-old wisdom tradition that has a lot to offer us now, particularly, as I said, when we're going through real chaos on the planet. And what alchemists understood is that part of transformation means a dismemberment. If something's going to change, whether it's me, if I'm going to change, or a system, a way of living, a relationship even, there needs to be an ability to move through what can feel often like everything's coming apart. Because again, the alchemists were looking at how things can change on the planet, and not just change in a degrading way like entropy, things run down over time, but how things can change to move to higher, more efficient, more elegant, we can say complex, effective states of order.
Yes.
And that's really what we look at in the mentorship is every single person who's gone through the mentorship or who works with us go through a personal transformation, as well as looking at how can they support transformation in the outer world. We can't do it without doing the inner work.
Is there a metaphorical or symbolic philosopher's stone in this process?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The philosopher's stone represents that kind of state of original wholeness. In other words, that state that we come into, that is our birthright, where we are in connection with the divine. And again, Benjamin and I are blessed with a granddaughter who's now 19 months, and we've been watching her bring that divinity into our lives and into our family. It just pours out of her. And we all, each of us, that's our birthright. And the philosopher's stone, the process of recovering that stone is really moving through our life. And in all the traditions, there's a recognition that if we live our lives in accordance with these alchemical principles, we actually return to that state of wholeness, that speck of divinity, but with consciousness, with awareness, and with wisdom.
I think you could say that the philosopher's stone is symbolized by a life that is imbued with purpose and meaning. And as you said, Victor, a life that is full of synchronicity.
Yes, because we're no longer separate from those cosmic energies, which we can call divine or sacred. So that philosopher's stone, another way of saying it would be, it's the recovery of wholeness.
Absolutely. All forms of energy and complementary healing are not meant as replacements for allopathic and Western medicine, but as adjuncts. What does alchemical healing bring to the mix?
Yeah. So, people often say complementary medicine, and my hackles have always gone up a bit about that, especially early on when I was a little more radical and wanted to prove myself. And I'd say, well, how can, say, Chinese medicine be complementary to Western medicine when Western medicine's only been around really in this form, maybe 150 years? Chinese medicine's been around over 3,000. So who's complimenting who here? That's my Aries fire speaking. But what I would say, my sense of it, and I'll get to where we are right now in the pandemic and in COVID. Obviously, we need Western medicine. Obviously, in order to move through the pandemic, and I wouldn't even say return to life, but as we knew it, but to hopefully transform to a wiser and more resilient way of being on the planet. That's my hope, that it can guide us to that. But we do need Western medicine for the physical body healing that needs to happen, for the immune restoration, for all of the things that the body needs to avoid the really terrible, terrible outcomes of this virus. But what about what's happening to the soul of human beings through the pandemic? Who's dealing with that? That's not the job of Western medicine. And as I quote a good friend of mine at the beginning of the book, who's a really devoted family doctor. She's a committed physician, but she said to me, what you do, what I do, she said, it doesn't complement. It is a kind of enhancement of healing. And she also said, I don't have time as a physician to look at the roots or the actual soul implications of illness. That's not my job. But that is what Benjamin and I are up to, and it is the teaching that we do. And I do see it as the role of alchemical healing, as the role of a new possibility. How do we support the soul in moving through a crisis such as we're in right now? Not just getting the vaccine and saying, okay, I'm immune now, but actually learning from, growing from, and transforming from this traumatic event, which isn't just personal, it's planetary. And that's going to take a lot of work. And that's what we're up to.
Absolutely. The alchemy of inner work is as poetic as it is filled with wisdom. I was touched by your sharing on the 100 meetings and that speck of light that is our spirit. Please share a little of that with our listeners.
Well, I'll start, and Benjamin, maybe you can add an astrological piece here too, because I do think it's relevant. But 100 meetings is the name of an acupuncture point at the very top of your head, and listeners can actually take their own finger and just run it lightly over the center of your head right on top, and you're going to find a little dip, which is actually the posterior, what's called the posterior fontanelle on a baby. So on a baby, it's actually a little soft spot, but we all have that little dip, and that is an acupuncture point called 100 meetings. And it's said in the Taoist tradition that that little soft spot on the infant is where that speck of starlight, that guiding light from heaven, and they even say the Big Dipper ladles up a bit of light from the Milky Way and pours that starlight right into the developing embryo. And that light settles in our heart and is our guiding light through our life. It is, the Taoists use the word, carries our mandate, our individual life Tao or purpose. Many, many traditions talk about the spirit coming in through that point. In Tibetan Buddhism, they talk about that point as the entryway, but it's also the point through which we leave at death. And when we go back to rejoin the stars and the galaxies, and our body disintegrates and goes back down into the earth divinity, back to the what we call the great goddess of the planet. But that light is eternal. That light that we get at the moment of conception is our eternal light, and it carries our heavenly mandate.
I want to just add that not so much an astrological perspective, but to say that, Victor, I appreciate your pointing out the poetry in the book. And I think that Lorie's writing, there's a kind of poetry to many of the case studies that are presented throughout the book, and the poetry of how a person's grappling with illness or suffering serves as a kind of portal or doorway into not only their healing, but like the fulfillment of more purpose in their life. And, hearkening back to your previous question of what does alchemical healing have to contribute to the field of medicine, I think that that's a huge piece of what we're up to in the work, is, looking at how these periods of suffering, how illness, how impasse can serve as a doorway. And when we get that insight, there is a certain poetry to looking at how it serves to help us unfold a piece of ourself and to understand our purpose in our life more fully.
Absolutely.
And I want to say that, Benjamin, I think part of our collaboration in the alchemy of inner work is that I tend to think in a very symbolic way, and the world comes to me as poetry. My work as a healer is often symbolic, poetic, mythical. And Benjamin is, in a lot of ways, the pragmatist. I mean, he's also a wizard, and he's also a magical seer of the stars, but he has a lot of earth in him. And probably ever since we met, he's always calling me, yes, that's beautiful, that's poetic, but how do I make that work in my life? what does that mean for, a person just living day to day, has a job, a family? How can we bring this to people so that they can use it? And I do feel, and it's one of the things I'm most proud of about the book, is that our collaboration allowed me to bring that poetry and beauty, which is so important to me, forward in a way that's also practical and usable. I mean, all through the writing process, Benjamin will call me back to that. Okay, yes, and how does this work in a person's life? So we have very practical meditations, exercises, how do you use a flower essence? How can anybody touch an acupuncture point? You don't have to go to college for 3 years. This is our birthright. We are born with enlivened points on the body that can calm us down, that can open our eyes, that can restore hope. Everyone should have access to this, and that's what we are up to in the book.
The wonderful work of Lorie Dechar and Benjamin Fox. Will be back with more of them and the alchemy of inner work after these words on the OMTimes radio network.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. ascendinghearts.com.
Look out, world, we're getting strong. The future's here and we belong. She can step, she can do more. Like build a rocket and watch it soar. Or clean the oceans and make the world a better place. Oh, she can step, so can you. Find a cure, invent something new. There's no challenge in the world that she can't face. She can STEM.
Learn more at She Can STEM. A message brought to you by the Ad Council.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
Hello, I'm Lisa Berry. Join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Light on Living. A chance to see new, hear different, and feel more as I shine the spotlight on all the ways to lighten the load of life's challenges. Light on Living is your link to that new way you're looking for, that new understanding that will enhance your life, and that positive connection that will support your growth. So join me, and you'll gain insight and start to see things in a new way that motivates you.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guests this week, Lorie Dechar and Benjamin Fox, were talking about the alchemy of inner work. Brian Tracy is quoted as saying, "You cannot control what happens to you, but you can control how you react to it." For some of us, this may be a challenge. Now, you offer a technique called practicing the pause. How does that work?
So practicing the pause in a certain way is the central technique or skill of a lot of what we do. It's something that is so simple that it seems almost silly and so difficult it takes a lifetime. Basically, when I teach this process, I've come to use the acronym RSVP. The first step in practicing the pause is just recognizing that you're about to react in a habitual way that many times in the past has already proven to be not the most optimal response. So recognition or realizing that I'm about to react is the first step in the pause process. And in ancient alchemical texts, they actually say that this recognition is the beginning of the work or the opus, as you mentioned at the beginning. So recognizing I'm about to react, I'm about to press the send button to my brother on an email that I should never be sending. So S is simply stop. Simply stop. And again, in Chinese medicine and Taoism, they understood that that stopping, that pausing, makes a space for something bigger than me, we could say spirit, to come in, as opposed to my own individual instinctual survival drive, we could say lower reptilian brain response. So stopping, recognize, simply stop. For the V, where I sort of cheat on the acronym here, is reverse. And it means I reverse the awareness so that rather than focusing on the outer thing that is triggering me, the upset, I look inside. I notice what's happening in my body. I notice my breath. I maybe notice a memory or a voice inside that's saying that's unjust, that's unfair, how could they? And I just care about it. That reversal includes a kind of friendliness or caring for the body, but not actually doing. All of this is about a not doing moment, an allowing moment. And so the P stands for presence, simply perceiving and being present to what is now. And in that process, that recognition, simply stopping, reversing awareness, and being present, maybe taking 3 deep breaths, waiting, the responsiveness, the more embodied, intelligent responsiveness to the situation can arise. And that's that differentiation between reacting from the limbic reptilian brain and responding, which is allowing what we can say the prefrontal medial cortex, the other parts of the brain that can hover over the whole situation. And in my view, allow spirit to come in, allow that spark of starlight in my heart to light up and guide me. And so that's the pause practice in a nutshell. And it's really all you need to know, RSVP, and take it from there. I think even in our relationship, Benjamin, we see how hard it is to practice.
Well, particularly when we're triggered or reactive, it's a really incredible practice for coming down into our bodies and listening deeply rather than being driven by habit or by our minds, which are monkey minds, just really.
And even our trauma responses, our triggered old trauma responses, which will activate the nervous system.
Yeah, or the coping mechanisms that we've developed in response to trauma. So it's a way to begin to reprogram all of that in the nervous system.
And as it's been said by many much wiser than me, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen twice, speak once.
Right.
That's very good. I never heard that. I love that.
Absolutely. You say also that we each have a laboratory to do this work. How do we locate our laboratory and what equipment is required?
Again, I'll start, and then Benjamin, please, chime in here. But the laboratory is this interior space. It's where the soul lives, really. We can say that it's the subtle body. It's the movement of chi within my physical being. So it's an enclosed, the laboratory is this inner space, but it's also my life. The laboratory is the life that I am blessed with, and it's mine to work with. The tool, really, the fundamental tool in alchemy is the awareness and the imagination. Alchemists would say imagination is our inner star. It's connected to that speck of starlight that allows me to see with my inner eyes. And again, we get into a lot of this in the book. But I would say the primary tool here is that reversal of awareness and then beginning to pay attention to what's happening inside of me. One of those tools we work with a lot is the body felt sense, how what I'm actually sensing in my body and viewing that as meaningful, not just incidental or a problem. And the other really important tool in this level of work is what we call the archetypes or symbols. So in brief, an archetype is a kind of primordial symbol that is universal. Every human being can resonate with it. We are born with these archetypes already embedded in our nervous systems. They're a really important part of alchemical healing work, and they're part of the dream work we talk about in the book. They're part of astrology. And Benjamin, maybe I'll just let you talk a little bit about how you look at the archetypes in your work with the planets and stars.
Well, Laura, I really want to come back to Victor's question about the laboratory, and to speak to. I mean, you spoke beautifully to the container of our body, being the laboratory. But I think too that our entire life, in a sense, is a laboratory. And for me, a big piece of this work is really about empowering people to play and to experiment in the laboratory of their life, to not be afraid to learn and to grow through experimentation. Now, I'm not, we're not recommending that people not go to a doctor or not seek out the support and professional opinion of someone if they're facing a real health crisis or a life-threatening issue. But there are lots of instances in our life where we can make changes just in terms of working with medicinals that come from the earth, more natural medicinals, where we can work with food, where we can experiment with our life, with lifestyle changes. And that can make a huge difference in how we experience ourselves and how we realize our health. So I think of our life, our body as a container, as a laboratory. And I think, that's sort of very central to the work we're doing as well.
I love that you put it that way. And within that laboratory, again, as you said, beginning with the learning to listen, learning the language of the body, and then learning the language of the archetypes. And then many of the tools that we develop and introduce in the book, including working with the wisdom of flowers through flower essences, through essential oils, working with the points on the body, the acupuncture points, working with the images that come to us at night, these gifts from the stars that come to us through our dreams. These are the tools. And the amazing thing is many of them are completely free. Many of them, we get every night a host of healing suggestions that are just coming to us freely from the universe. And even the different medicinals that we work with are readily available. You can even make flower essences once you learn this way of listening to plants, listening to how they resonate, that the universe is filled with these resonances. The universe wants to help us heal.
and cultivating our connection to the earth, to the planet. That was so much the vision that we had for creating the community network, was that it could be a place where we could literally network with one another and empower one another to take responsibility and to take charge of our own health. So.
The wisdom and experience of Lorie Dechar and Benjamin Fox, their book, The Alchemy of Inner Work. One more time, please tell our listeners where they can get your books, find out about your website and all that you do.
Our website is anewpossibility.com, and you can find us on Instagram at anewpossibility. And at the website, you'll find a page, actually a page for each of the 3 books that Lorie has written in the book that we wrote together, The Alchemy of Inner Work. And there are links there to buy the book. And there's also a link to find out more about our Inner Healing Circle, which is the community network that we have right from the website.
And thank you both so much for joining us and sharing this wonderful wisdom that's so needed in our world right now.
Thank you so much, Victor. It's been delightful to have this conversation.
Yeah, Victor, thank you for your really great questions.
And great questions.
Great to meet with you.
And thank you for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor, the Voice Fuhrman. Have a wonderful week.